Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome to Zodiac Secrets and Tarot.com. In this episode of the Lady Magnate's Magic Podcast, we're diving deep into mysticism. Grab your favorite cup of antioxidants, whether it's green tea, coffee, or red wine, and join us for this insightful exploration. Mysticism, the journey of union with the divine across cultures. Mysticism has fascinated humanity for millennia. At its heart, mysticism is about a direct, personal experience of the sacred or ultimate reality, a union with the divine so profound that the usual sense of separateness falls away. Mystics across cultures describe encounters with a sacred presence that transform their inner life and how they relate to the world. From medieval Christian nuns enraptured by God's love to Sufi poets dancing in ecstasy, Hindu sages absorbed in non-dual awareness, and Zen masters awakening to emptiness, mystical traditions around the world share striking common threads. In this comprehensive overview, we'll explore major mystical traditions: Christian, Islamic, Sufi, Jewish, Hindu, Buddhist, and Taoist, and see how personal experiences of the divine have inspired teachings of love, unity, ego-transcendence, inner light, and compassion. We'll also look at how these experiences change mystics' view of life and relationships, and how modern seekers pursue mystical insight today through meditation, prayer, breath work, psychedelics, and more. Let's begin our journey into the mystic path in an accessible, conversational way for the curious mind. What is mysticism? Mysticism is often defined as the attempt to achieve direct contact or union with the ultimate reality or God, beyond ordinary perception and intellect. Rather than only believing in or thinking about the divine, mystics seek to experience it firsthand. Such experiences are typically described as moments of unity, being one with God or the cosmos, often accompanied by feelings of boundless love, inner light, and profound peace. The English word mysticism has roots in the Greek mystikos, meaning secret or hidden, referring to ancient mystery religions where initiates sought hidden spiritual knowledge. In a mystical state, people report encountering a reality that feels more real than everyday life, yet ineffable, beyond words, and transcendent. As one scholar puts it, mysticism joins together into one concept separate practices and ideas from many cultures, a family resemblance of experiences across different religions. Despite variations, mystics everywhere speak of a living encounter with the sacred that transforms their understanding of themselves and the world. Crucially, these experiences are not just fleeting ecstasies. In authentic mysticism, they lead to a lasting inner transformation of the person's mind, heart, and behavior. Mystical experiences are typically cultivated through spiritual practices, for example, contemplative prayer, deep meditation, chanting, or yogic exercises. Often, there is a process of inner purification or self-discipline leading up to the illuminative encounter. Traditions sometimes map out stages of the mystic path. For instance, Christian mystics describe a progression of purgation, cleansing the self, illumination, experiencing divine light or insight, and union, the soul's merger with God. In the union stage, the mystic's sense of an I separate from the divine disappears, a state of oneness often described with bold imagery. The 14th century Christian mystic Jan van Ruusbroek wrote that in the mystical union we can nevermore find any distinction between ourselves and God. His contemporary Meister Eckhart likewise spoke of the soul becoming completely one with God, so much that God makes me his only begotten Son without any difference. Such language can sound shocking, but mystics clarify they do not literally become the Almighty. Rather, they participate in the divine life or share in God's being in a way that transcends the ego. In the mystical state, as one classic definition puts it, the soul is merged in the being of God and loses the sense of any separate existence. Importantly, mysticism is not about permanent escapism into trance. The goal of the mystic is a transformed life, to emerge from the moment of union with a new perspective that endures in daily living. Many mystics insist that the true measure of the experience is its lasting fruits: greater love, humility, and a sense of God's presence in every moment. As we'll see, genuine mystics across traditions emphasize compassion and ethical action after their encounters, countering the notion that mysticism is a selfish flight from reality. With this understanding in mind, let's delve into specific mystical traditions and see how each approaches the divine encounter. Christian mysticism, union through love and nothingness. Christian mysticism has a rich history, from the early Desert Fathers and Mothers, through medieval saints like Saint Teresa of Avila and Saint John of the Cross, to modern contemplatives. Christian mystics seek an intimate union with God through prayer, love, and the grace of Christ. They often describe a path of inner purification, dying to self, followed by an experience of divine union, and finally a return to ordinary life suffused with God's presence. A famous outline of the Christian mystical journey was given by the Jesuit theologian Joseph Marichal. He described 3 broad stages. 1. The integration of one's ego around the love of a personal God, practiced through prayer and discipline. 2. A transcendent revelation of God to the soul, experienced as ecstasy or union in which one's faculties, thinking, senses, may fall silent in awe. And 3. A readjustment of the soul's faculties, returning to engage with the world under the continuous influence of God's presence. Notably, in this final stage, the mystic regains contact with other people and the creation, but now sees with the eyes of God, so to speak. The great mystics stress this 3rd stage, the unitive life, as essential. The purpose is not a temporary high, but a permanent transformation where one lives daily possessed by divine love. Far from avoiding moral responsibility, authentic Christian mysticism heightens one's ethical and compassionate engagement with others. Dying to self is a constant theme. Christian mystics insist the ego, the selfish or false self, must be crucified with Christ so that God can live fully in the soul. This process can be painful. Saint John of the Cross called it the dark night of the soul, when one feels spiritually dry or tested as impurities are burned away. But this emptiness precedes the infilling of divine presence. The mystic Meister Eckhart spoke of a desert of the soul where one is empty of all but God, and taught that in the ground of the soul the birth of God takes place when we let go of our ego completely. Similarly, Theologia Germanica, a classic anonymous mystical text, said Christ's human nature was utterly bereft of self, a pure house of God, and that we must become the same. Paradoxically, this radical detachment is mostly an internal attitude, not necessarily an external abandonment of the world. As 18th century mystic William Law wrote, one need not flee to a monastery. The one true way of dying to self is the way of patience, humility, and resignation to God in the midst of daily life. Once purged and illuminated, the soul is lifted into loving union with God. Christian mystics often describe this union in bridal or familial terms, spiritual marriage, or the soul becoming a child of God. Saint Teresa of Avila, in her work The Interior Castle, likened the culmination of prayer to entering the innermost chamber, the 7th mansion, where the soul is in perpetual communion with God. She explained that even while occupied with worldly tasks, one can remain in this continuous awareness of God's presence. A humble 17th century monk, Brother Lawrence, famously illustrated this. He wrote that even while he was working in the kitchen, amid clattering pots and pans, I possessed God in as great tranquility as if I were upon my knees at the Blessed Sacrament. In other words, the mystical union became an abiding reality for him, infusing every ordinary act with a sense of the divine. Whirling dervishes of the Sufi tradition perform the Sima dance, symbolizing the soul's journey of love as it whirls toward union with the divine. In Sufism, Music and movement are used as meditation to reach ecstatic states of remembrance of God. Islamic Sufism, the path of divine love. In Islam, Sufism is the mystical heart of the faith, often described as the path of love. Sufis seek a direct experience of Allah, God, through intense love and devotion, seeing God as the beloved and themselves as the lover. As one Sufi writer beautifully put it, the Sufi is a traveler on the path of love, a wayfarer journeying back to God through the mysteries of the heart. The relationship is that of lover and beloved, through prayer, poetry, music, and sometimes dance. The Sufi strives to merge into God's love, losing the ego self in the ecstasy of union. This has been called the journey from separation to union. The soul yearns for God like a lover pining for the beloved, until finally there is no separation as the lover merges into the beloved, the self drowned in love's ocean. Perhaps the most famous Sufi mystic in the West is Jalal ad-Din Rumi, a 13th century Persian poet. Rumi's poetry is suffused with longing for God and the joy of spiritual union. He and other Sufis founded the Mevlevi whirling dervish practice, a spinning dance done in contemplation of God. The whirling is a form of dhikr, remembrance, done with music and poetry, aiming to let the dancer empty themselves and become a channel for the divine love. Rumi wrote many passionate verses of love that, while inspired by his human beloved, Shams of Tabriz, ultimately point to divine love. For example, a famous saying attributed to Rumi declares, "You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop." This poetic metaphor expresses the mystical insight that the individual soul contains the whole of reality within it, since only God truly exists. Similarly, Rumi says, "Love is the bridge between you and everything." In Sufi thought, Allah is love, and by loving God one comes to love all creation, seeing the one reflected in the many. Classical Sufi teachings describe states known as fana and baka. Fana means annihilation, specifically, the annihilation of the ego in the presence of God. In the height of mystical prayer or sama, Sufi music ceremony, a Sufi may experience fana, where their sense of I completely fades, only Allah's reality remains in their consciousness. This is comparable to other traditions' notions of ego death or self-emptying. But Sufism doesn't end there. After fana comes baka, meaning subsistence or abiding. In baka, the mystic returns to normal awareness, but is now permanently transformed, living in God and with God. The person's individual existence remains, but is continually united with the divine will. One Sufi text says in this state the lover is alive in God, with God's qualities shining through the person. The 12th century Sufi philosopher Ibn Arabi articulated a concept called Wahdat al-Wujud, the unity of being, which influenced many Sufis. It teaches that all existence is one, everything is a manifestation of the one divine being, and the mystical goal is to realize this unity fully. Sufis like Ibn Arabi and Al-Ghazali emphasized that while God is transcendent, God is also intimately present in the heart of each person, and through remembrance, dhikr, one can awaken to that presence. Love is the dominant motif. A modern Sufi teacher, Llewellyn Vaughan-Lee, writes, "For the Sufi, the relationship to God is that of lover and beloved, so close that finally there is no separation, as the lover becomes lost in love, drowned in love's ocean." Sufi poetry is replete with wine, music, and romance imagery to convey this intoxication with God. But it's not just bliss, it's also transformation in character. A saying in Sufism goes, if your knowledge of God does not make you more compassionate, more loving, then you have missed the point. Indeed, the true sign of union with God is love and service to others. The Sufi ideal is the perfect human, Al-Insan al-Kamil, a person who has effaced their ego and reflects God's attributes of mercy, kindness, and justice in the world. Many Sufi saints became noted for their charity and tolerance, transcending religious and social barriers in love of all beings. In summary, Sufism shows us a path where devotional fervor and poetic ecstasy lead to the annihilation of ego and divine love, yielding a life of humility and universal compassion. Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, and the inner light. Judaism also has a long-standing mystical tradition, principally Kabbalah and later Hasidism. Jewish mysticism seeks a direct cleaving to God, known in Hebrew as devakat, clinging or attachment to the divine. The Kabbalists of medieval Europe and Safed, 16th century Palestine, developed complex cosmologies of God's emanations, Sphirot, and taught meditative techniques to unite the soul with God's presence, Shekinah. Devakat was described as the highest spiritual state, essentially communion or union with God achieved especially during intense prayer. In prayer, the mystic would focus on sacred names and intentions, kavanot, aiming to feel the divine presence palpably and lose awareness of everything else. This state was usually considered transitory. One cannot remain in complete ecstasy forever, but it offers a glimpse of the soul's ultimate reunion with God. The Zohar, a foundational Kabbalistic text, says that in moments of true devakat, the soul cleaves to the ray of the infinite, experiencing a taste of the world to come. In the Hasidic movement, founded in 18th century Eastern Europe by Rabbi Israel Baal Shem Tov, mysticism became more democratized and joyful. The Hasidic masters taught that devakat could be experienced not only in prayer, but in everyday acts, by performing them with the right intention and love for God. All your deeds should be for the sake of heaven, they urged, meaning any activity can be spiritual if done with awareness of God. A key Hasidic teaching is that God's glory fills all the world, so the divine can be found everywhere, in the most ordinary moments. Thus, the Hasid would dance, sing, and tell stories to ignite love of God in the hearts of the community. Joy was considered essential. Melancholy was seen as a barrier to God. In contrast to earlier ascetic Kabbalists who might practice mortifications, Hasidim emphasized serving God with happiness, love, and warmth. They still pursued intense prayer, sometimes hours of singing and swaying in the synagogue to reach ecstatic states, but they also believed holiness could be brought into the village square. One Hasidic tale tells of a tzaddik, holy man, so filled with God's presence that even when he was chopping wood or playing with children, he was in union with God, his heart silently singing the divine name. The concept of cleaving to God, devakat, appears even in the Torah, Deuteronomy 11 verse 22, to cleave unto him. The Talmud initially interpreted it practically, cleaving to God by sticking to righteous people, etc., but the mystics took it more literally, as an experiential union. Kabbalists often prayed to the Shekinah, the indwelling divine presence, envisioned as a feminine aspect of God, to achieve devakat. They believed that while complete union is only fully realized after death or in the Messianic age, glimpses of it are possible now. Hasidic masters like Rabbi Dov Biar of Mezerich taught techniques of visualization and focus on the divine unity to attain states where the ego self was nullified, Bittul Hayesh. In those moments, the Hasid might cry out or fall into a trance, perceiving nothing but the reality of Ein Sof, the infinite. Witnesses of Hasidic prayer gatherings in the 18th century report scenes of intense fervor, Hasidim, devotees, trembling, weeping, laughing in ecstasy as they felt God close. Yet, afterwards, these mystics returned to daily life charged with compassion. A striking feature of Hasidism was its emphasis on love between people as a channel to God. Love of God and love of one's fellow were two sides of the same coin. Indeed, one Hasidic saying argues that if you cannot see the spark of God in your neighbor, your mystical ecstasy is suspect. In modern times, Kabbalah continues to be studied, sometimes superficially in pop culture, but also seriously in religious circles. It gave us enduring mystical symbols like the Tree of Life and ideas such as Tikkun Olam, repairing the world by raising divine sparks. The Hasidic legacy, carried on by groups like Chabad, emphasizes inner spirituality within outwardly observant life. A Chabad teaching explains that when a person performs a mitzvah, commandment, with true love and awe of God, they can experience a moment of devakut, a flash of union where the soul feels unified with its source. Overall, Jewish mysticism offers an example of seeking the infinite within the finite, finding God's inner light in scripture, in nature, in community, and within one's own soul through cleaving love. As the Jewish Virtual Library succinctly states, devakut is an adherence to or communion with God, sometimes reaching the level of mystical union. Hindu mysticism, non-duality and devotion. India is often called a land of mystics, home to a vast array of spiritual paths. Hindu mysticism is not a single thing but encompasses several streams. Two of the most prominent are 1. The path of knowledge and non-duality, Jnana/Advaita Vedanta, and 2. The path of devotion, Bhakti Yoga. Both aim at the same goal, union with the ultimate reality, Brahman or God, but approach it differently. Advaita Vedanta, Advaita meaning not two, is the classic non-dual philosophy expounded by Adi Shankara and others. According to Advaita, our true self, Atman, is identical with Brahman, the infinite divine reality. The problems of vidya, ignorance, we mistakenly identify with the limited ego and body, seeing ourselves as separate from God. The mystical goal is thus one of realization, to directly know that I am Brahman. This isn't an intellectual idea, but an awakening experience, often called moksha, liberation, or enlightenment. The Hindu Upanishads, ancient scriptures, are full of mystical insight, famously declaring Tat Tvam Asi, thou art that, meaning the core of your being is the absolute. A realized mystic in this tradition will often describe their experience as one of pure consciousness without a second, an unbounded awareness where the individual self and God are one and the same. For example, the sage Ramana Maharshi in the 20th century guided people in the inquiry, who am I? Until the false I, ego, vanished, and the only I remaining was the universal self shining in the heart. To reach this state, Hindu mystics practice various sadhanas, spiritual disciplines meditation, such as Raja Yoga techniques of concentration, renunciation of egoic desires, ethical living, and often guidance from a guru. Yoga, in its broader sense, means union, and the Yoga Sutras define yoga as the stilling of the mind's fluctuations leading to samadhi, a state of absorbed concentration. In the highest Nirvikalpa Samadhi, the distinction between meditator, active meditation, and object of meditation dissolves, leaving only oneness. Many Upanishads describe the liberated person, Jivan Mukta, as being established in the knowledge of the self, seeing the one self in all beings. One such mystic exclaims, "Where is delusion when I see unity?" Another says it is like a wave realizing it is the ocean. The wave's form was never truly separate from the sea. This is the monistic type of mystical experience, a oneness devoid of multiplicity. Alongside this, India also gave rise to the powerful bhakti, devotional, movements. Bhakti yoga is often called the yoga of love. It seeks union with the divine through love and surrender, rather than through abstract knowledge. A Bhakti mystic sees God in a personal form, as Rama, Krishna, Kali, Shiva, etc., whatever form of the divine they adore, and cultivates an intense relationship of love, much like the Sufi lover-beloved paradigm. The ultimate goal in bhakti is sometimes described as sayajya, complete union with God, or residing forever in God's presence. Yet many bhaktas say the joy is in the loving itself, being in an eternal love union where one retains a slight duality, lover and beloved, just for the sake of love play. For example, The 16th century mystic Mirabai sang of herself as Krishna's bride, yearning and ecstatic in his love. Another devotee, Hanuman, from the epic Ramayana, declared, "When I forget who I am, I serve you. When I know who I am you," indicating the oscillation between duality and non-duality in devotion. Bhakti saints from South India's Alvars to North India's Mirabai, Tulsidas, Chaitanya, and others often had experiences of visceral divine presence. They would cry, dance, and sometimes go into trances of union. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who popularized the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra, would reportedly become so absorbed in God that he lost external consciousness, his body trembling in bliss as tears of prema, divine love, flowed. Such states are considered marks of rasa, the sweet flavor of communion with God. The Dictionary of Mysticism defines Bhakti Yoga as the quest of union with the divine spirit through love and devotion, Bhakti Marga. In practice, this may involve hours of singing hymns, kirtan, repeating God's name, japa or simran, and visualizing God's form in one's heart. By adoration and remembrance, the devotee's ego thoughts are gradually replaced by an awareness of God in everything. The mystic eventually feels God's love inwardly and sees God in all beings, leading to a profound kinship with others. As one modern commentator notes, the practice of love brings us into harmony with the Supreme Being, our own true nature, and with everyone else. In other words, loving God transforms how one loves the world. A true bhakta becomes gentle, compassionate, and selfless. Both the jnana, knowledge, and bhakti streams in Hinduism often meet in the end. The 19th century Saint Ramakrishna exemplified this. He practiced intense devotion to goddess Kali until he had a vision of her and achieved samadhi, but he also later experienced the formless Brahman, concluding that all paths lead to the same divine ocean. He described the climax of his Kali worship as a moment where the Divine Mother Kali revealed herself as the infinite absolute. His consciousness flowed into the absolute in a non-dual union. Yet he returned from that state full of sweet love for Mother and for all creatures. His disciple Swami Vivekananda later taught this idea as the harmony of religions through mystical realization. In summary, Hindu mysticism offers both an absolute union without distinction, non-duality, and an intimate union of lover and beloved devotion. In both cases, the individual self is transcended, either absorbed into Brahman or totally given over to God's love. The result is a person who often radiates peace, equanimity, and compassion. It's no coincidence that Mahatma Gandhi, though not a mystic in the trance-like sense, drew on this heritage by seeing God, truth, in everyone and emphasizing love as a force, clearly inspired by the Upanishadic and Bhakti realization of oneness. Buddhist mysticism, emptiness and enlightenment. Buddhism, with its non-theistic framework, is not always labeled mysticism, but it certainly has mystical elements, especially in Zen, Dzogchen, and other meditative schools. Buddhist mysticism centers on direct insight into the nature of reality and consciousness, often described as realizing emptiness, sunyata, or the Buddha nature within. Rather than union with a personal God, Buddhist mystics attain unity with the thusness of all things, a non-dual awareness where self/other and all dualities fade. In Zen Buddhism, Chan in China, the quintessential mystical experience is called Satora or Kensho, meaning seeing one's true nature. Through meditation, zazen, koan practice, or even spontaneous awakening, the Zen practitioner breaks through the illusion of a separate ego. One of Zen's famous sayings by Master Dogen is, "To study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be enlightened by all things." In other words, the path of introspection leads to forgetting the little self, and then one wakes up to a reality where everything, all the 10,000 things, is experienced as part of one's own true self. When the self is forgotten, the Buddha Dharma reveals itself as the whole of life. Zen accounts of enlightenment often mention an experience of great clarity, unity, and joy, sometimes triggered by something as simple as a sound. The classic story of a monk enlightened by the sound of a pebble hitting bamboo. After enlightenment, Dogen says, one finds that your body and mind, as well as the bodies and minds of others, have been cast off, and yet in that very ordinariness of no self, the miraculous functioning of enlightenment continues endlessly. A Zen mystic thus continues chopping wood and carrying water, but now sees the absolute in each moment and responds to life spontaneously with compassion and wisdom. A Buddhist monk walks toward the ancient gates of Angkor, Cambodia, a symbol of the spiritual journey. In Buddhist mysticism, enlightenment is an awakening to the true nature of reality, often described as realizing emptiness or the Buddha nature in all things. In Tibetan Buddhism, the Dzogchen tradition, particularly in the Nyingma school, offers a very direct mystical approach. Dzogchen teaches about the innate purity of mind, often called Rigpa, the primordial awareness. The practice is to recognize Rigpa in the present moment. This recognition is described as a flash of clear light, an experience of the mind's fundamental clarity and emptiness. One Dzogchen text likens it to an infinite sky-like nature of mind that is ever present. When a student, with the help of a master, recognizes this ground of being, they experience a profound shift. The ordinary thinking mind, Sem, is seen as insubstantial movements within the vast expanse of Rigpa. This can be sudden and powerful, akin to enlightenment experiences in Zen. In Dzogchen, one strives to stabilize this recognition so that eventually every moment is experienced as the play of Rigpa, without falling back into the ignorance of dualism. They describe the final result as rainbow body, a state where even the physical elements of the person are said to dissolve into light at death due to complete realization, an ultimate mystical attainment. Across Buddhism, a hallmark of mystical insight is the understanding of non-duality, that subject and object, self and world, are not two separate things. Mahayana Buddhist philosophy, like in the Heart Sutra, explicitly says, form is emptiness, emptiness is form, pointing to the unity of the relative and the absolute. Buddhist mystics realize the emptiness, which means interdependence and lack of separate self, of all phenomena, which paradoxically reveals the fullness of a compassionate, luminous reality. They often report an overwhelming sense of compassion arising with enlightenment. In Zen, it is said that enlightenment spontaneously brings the bodhisattva vow, the commitment to help liberate all beings, because one now sees all beings as not separate from oneself. D.T. Suzuki, a Zen scholar, noted that true satori results in one seeing the same essence in everything and thus treating others with great kindness. An illustrative Zen story. After a monk attained enlightenment, his teacher asked him how he felt. The monk replied, "I feel as if I'm wafting gently with no weight." The teacher shook his head, implying the realization wasn't complete. Later, the monk returned and said, "Now I feel just as ordinary as ever." The teacher smiled and said, "Good. Now you will simply help everyone you meet." This captures the idea that mystical experience in Buddhism leads to an ordinary state that is actually extraordinary, a state of natural, unforced compassion and presence. As Zen Master Dogen concluded in the passage above, to be enlightened by all things is to free one's body and mind and those of others. There is no trace of ego or even of enlightenment left, and life becomes a continuous, traceless enlightenment. Thus, Buddhist mysticism might be characterized by words like nirvana, extinction of ego, sunyata, emptiness, bodhi, awakening. But these concepts come alive only in experience. And the experiences are transformative. One Zen master described his enlightenment as feeling that my heart has become capable of every form, meaning he can empathize with every being. Another Buddhist text speaks of enlightenment as attaining the heart of great compassion. In summary, Buddhist mystics awaken to the radiant emptiness that is the nature of everything, and in doing so, they often become embodiments of wisdom and compassion for others. Taoist mysticism, harmony with the Tao. Taoism, Taoism, in China offers a mystical path focused on living in harmony with the Tao, the ineffable way or principle underlying the universe. Taoist mysticism is not about visions of a personal God, but about aligning one's being with the natural flow of reality and experiencing the unity of all things. The classic text Tao Te Ching, attributed to Laozi, is full of mystical aphorisms. It encourages one to empty oneself and become receptive to the Tao. Empty yourself of everything. Let the mind become still. The 10,000 things rise and fall while the self watches their return. The way is to return to the state of the infant. Such lines hint at a state of primordial simplicity and unity. A key Taoist concept is Wu Wei, often translated non-action or effortless action. This doesn't mean doing nothing. It means acting in complete harmony with the Tao, with no egoic forcing. The mystic Zhuangzi, Chuang-Tzu, a foundational Taoist philosopher, illustrated this with stories of butchers, carpenters, and swimmers whose skill came from merging with the flow of nature. Zhuangzi himself often wrote of losing himself in nature, wandering free and easy, merging his spirit with the wind and the earth. In one famous passage, he dreams he is a butterfly, and upon waking is not sure if he is Zhuangzi who dreamed he was a butterfly or a butterfly now dreaming he is Zhuangzi. This speaks to the dissolution of fixed boundaries between self and other, a hallmark of mystical unity. Taoist inner practices, often called internal alchemy or Naiden, aimed at immortality or spiritual transcendence. Practitioners used meditation, breath control, visualization of energy centers, and movement, like Tai Chi, to circulate the life force, Qi, and harmonize with the Tao. In advanced stages, Taoist adepts described feeling a light within. Some texts call it the inner illumination or seeing the inner dawn. They also described experiences of their body transforming into subtle energies. However, for many Taoist sages, the highest mysticism was not about supernatural feats, but about a simple, natural state of oneness. The true person, Zhenren, of Taoism breathes from their heels, meaning deeply and naturally, and is at one with heaven and earth. Zhuangzi describes such an authentic mystic as neutral and open, free from rigid judgments, because they see beyond partial truths. In Taoist view, all beings and everything are fundamentally one, and opposing opinions can arise only when people lose sight of the whole. When one is tuned into the Tao, one recognizes the relativity of conventional distinctions like good/bad, and dwells in the neutral center of being. This doesn't make the mystic amoral. Rather, it makes them flexible, compassionate, and humble, not clinging to prejudices. A striking Taoist mystical notion is that the Tao is within you. The Tao Te Ching says the Tao is the mysterious essence inside all beings. Later Taoists personified this as the original spirit residing in the human. Zhuangzi wrote of the Supreme Master residing inside each person, hidden by our petty concerns. By calming passions and prejudices, the closed systems of the mind, the Tao within can be perceived. One instruction goes, do not meditate, do not cogitate, follow no school, follow no way, and then you will attain the Tao. This somewhat paradoxical advice means that spontaneity and naturalness, rather than strenuous effort, reveal the Tao. Indeed, many Taoist mystics favored going into nature, wandering in mountains or sitting by a stream, to let their minds become mirror smooth, reflecting reality without distortion. In those moments, they experienced unity with the 10,000 things, the whole universe. A passage in the Chuang-Tzu describes a sage who can sit in forgetfulness. He forgets his body, his identity, even his concept of right and wrong, and merge with the great unity. This is Taoist samadhi. Unity and longevity were often linked in Taoism. It was believed that if one attains perfect harmony with the Tao, one's life force will not be dissipated, possibly leading to immortality or at least a very natural death where one's spirit returns to the Tao, sometimes depicted as becoming an immortal or transcendent. But beyond literal immortality, the ideal was a kind of spiritual immortality in life, living in the eternal now, one with the eternal Tao. In that state, the mystic might appear ordinary, like the woodcarver in one story who just humbly credits the Tao for his masterpiece, but there's a profound alignment behind their simplicity. In modern terms, Taoist mysticism resonates with ecological consciousness and living in the present. One could say a Taoist mystic experiences each moment as complete, flowing effortlessly. They often become like water, a prime Tao metaphor yielding yet powerful, taking the shape of whatever it enters, nourishing all things without strife. Compassion, Ci, frugality, Jian, and humility, Bugen Wei Tianxia Xian, not daring to be first in the world, were called the three treasures by Laozi, virtues that arise naturally from attunement to the Tao. So, the test of Taoist mystical attainment is a life marked by simplicity, kindness, and alignment with the rhythms of nature. Shared themes in mystical experience. Despite the diverse cultural language, mystics across traditions consistently report common themes in their experiences. Here are some of the key threads that weave through mystical writings east and west. Divine love and longing. Mystics often describe an overwhelming love filling their heart, either love of the divine or love from the divine, usually both. In devotional traditions, Christian, Sufi, Bhakti, this is explicit. God is experienced as an ocean of love, and the mystic's soul drowns joyfully in it. The Sufi poet Rumi and Hindu poet Mirabai, though continents apart, both speak the language of passionate longing for the beloved. This love is not merely emotional, but seems to be a fundamental force that binds the mystic to all creation. As one modern text summarizes, God is an infinite ocean of love, and each soul is a drop from that ocean. Realizing this kinship through love leads mystics to radiate love outward. They often emphasize compassion for all beings as a natural extension of loving God. For example, the Sufi mystic Rabia declared, "I love God. I have no time left to hate the devil." The heart is so filled with love that negative feelings fade. Unity, non-duality. Almost every mystic asserts that at the deepest level, all is one. In Christian terms, this is the soul's union with God where no separation remains. In Hindu Advaita, it is the realization that Atman is Brahman. The individual self and the universal self are the same. Sufis like Ibn Arabi taught the unity of being, that only God truly exists, and we are not apart from that reality. Zen Buddhists speak of experiencing the one taste of all phenomena or being enlightened by the 10,000 things, seeing the universe as a single, interdependent process. Taoism says the 10,000 things are one when seen by the enlightened eye. This unity can manifest as a feeling that the boundary between self and world dissolves. Mystics often report that they felt one with the cosmos or one with their beloved deity. Jan van Ruysbroek's assertion, "No distinction between ourselves and God," is one example. A Zen master might more impishly say, "Mountains and rivers and I, all the same." This theme of oneness is so pervasive that William James noted a unanimity among mystics on this point. It's the essence of the unitive experience. Ego death and surrender. To reach the above states, mystics universally talk about shedding the ego or false self. Terms like annihilation, crucifixion of the self, fana, dying before you die, extinction, forgetting the self all point to the same idea. The ordinary ego, with its selfish desires and anxieties, must dissolve or be transcended for mystical union to occur. This is often described as a painful but liberating process. St. John of the Cross's dark night is one roadmap, a period where one's attachments and pride are purged in darkness so that the light of God can emerge. In Sufism, the concept of fana, ego-death, is followed by baka, living on in God, which parallels how many mystics lose themselves to find themselves. In Zen, as cited, one forgets the self in enlightenment. Mystics frequently use language of surrender. They let go utterly, yielding control to the divine or to the fundamental reality. And then, paradoxically, they feel more free and alive than ever. As Meister Eckhart said, "When I vanished into nothing, then I was most fruitful." After ego death, mystics describe a new identity grounded in God or the true self. St. Paul's line, "Not I, but Christ in me," is emblematic of the sense that a higher self, divine presence, now lives through the mystic. The outcome is often a profound humility. Having touched something infinite, the mystic no longer aggrandizes their little self. Instead, they often become selfless servants of others, which leads to the next theme. Inner light and illumination. Many mystics report experiences of luminous radiance, sometimes seen inwardly, sometimes as a metaphor for clarity. Christian mystics speak of divine light or brilliant radiance. For instance, Saint Simeon the New Theologian, 10th C, described seeing a brilliant divine radiance filling the room in prayer. Quakers later spoke of the inner light present in each person. In Kabbalah, the goal is cleaving to the light of Ein Sof. Buddhist Dzogchen literally trains one to recognize the clear light mind, especially at the moment of death or deep meditation. In Hinduism, mystics might see the Jyoti, divine light, during Kundalini awakening or in deep samadhi. This light is not just physical, it often symbolizes knowledge or awareness. For example, in many traditions, illumination equals enlightenment. The lights turn on in the mind, revealing the true nature of reality. Some mystics have visible light phenomena, halos, glowing faces. Think of Moses coming down Sinai, or the Buddha with rays emanating, but more often they describe it as an inner vision. Whether seen or simply felt as illumined understanding, light represents the unveiling of the divine within the darkness of ordinary perception. Compassion and oneness of heart. One might assume a person lost in unity might become indifferent to the world. If all is illusion, who cares about others? But the opposite is usually true in genuine mysticism. The experience of oneness produces profound compassion. When a mystic feels unified with others or with God's love, empathy flows naturally. Julian of Norwich, after her visions, declared, "I saw that God is in all things, and we are all one in God's love," leading her to call all her even Christians, fellow people, not to worry because all shall be well. In Buddhism, the awakening of enlightenment is said to spontaneously give rise to the bodhisattva vow. The enlightened one willingly forgoes final nirvana to help all beings find liberation. In one Buddhist text, the newly awakened exclaim, "This enlightenment is marvelous. I must share it with the whole world." Similarly, Dogen's quote continued, "To be enlightened by all things is to free one's body and mind and those of others." Love of God translating into love of neighbor is heavily emphasized by Christian mystics. After experiencing union, many, like Saint Francis of Assisi or Saint Catherine of Genoa, engaged in extensive works of charity. They often speak of seeing the face of Christ in everyone. Sufis likewise emphasize service. A Sufi motto says, "Serve all creatures as an expression of love for God." In essence, mystical insight erases the artificial walls between self and other, so one treats others as oneself, with kindness, patience, and understanding. Compassion becomes the ethical fruit of mysticism. Even those mystics who remain reclusive in caves usually become beacons of compassion when people come to them, offering counsel, healing, or simply radiating peace. It's noteworthy that many religious social reformers or saints had a core mystical experience driving them. For example, Gandhi's nonviolence was rooted in his Advaitic belief in unity. Martin Luther King Jr. drew on a deep spiritual well, etc. The Golden Rule, treating others as oneself, is essentially mysticism expressed in ethics, since mysticism literally sees others as oneself. In summary, mystical experiences, for all their variety, tend to involve a boundless love, a sense of unity beyond all division, a relinquishment of the personal ego, encounters with an inner light or presence, and a resulting transformation that makes the mystic more compassionate and awake to the beauty in others. It's as if touching the ultimate reality resets a person to their factory settings: love, unity, and goodness. As the American poet Walt Whitman, who had his own mystical sensibilities, wrote, "We are all spiritual beings having a human experience." Mystics realize this in a flash, and it changes everything. From ecstasy to empathy, how mystical experiences transform life. One of the most important aspects of mysticism is how it changes the mystic as a person. The value of a mystical experience isn't just in the moment of bliss or insight, but in its after effects on behavior, perspective, and relationships. Mystics consistently report a profound shift in how they see the world and treat other people after their unitive experiences. Here are some key transformations that occur. A new worldview. After a genuine mystical experience, the world often appears transfigured. Many speak of seeing divine presence everywhere. What once seemed ordinary now glows with significance. A Christian mystic may see each person as a child of God in whom Christ lives. A Hindu mystic sees all forms as Lila, the divine play of Krishna or the dance of Shiva. A Buddhist sees all phenomena as expressions of Buddha nature. This doesn't mean they literally see halos around everything, though some have reported auras or light, but rather their interpretation of reality shifts to one of unity and sacredness. For instance, after Thomas Merton, 20th century Trappist mystic, had a sudden experience of cosmic unity on a street corner in Louisville, he wrote that he saw strangers walking by as shining like the sun. He was overwhelmed by the realization that he loved all these people, that we were all one in God. This persisted as a deep conviction that changed how he engaged in the world, leading him to become active in peace and interfaith work. Such shifts are common. The sense of separateness that fuels fear and competition diminishes, replaced by a sense of interconnectedness that fosters care and cooperation. Overcoming fear of death. Mystics often lose or greatly reduce their fear of death. Having touched a dimension of reality beyond the physical, they come to see death as going home or merging back into the one. This can make them remarkably courageous and peaceful in the face of danger or their own mortality. For example, medieval mystic Marjorie Kempf, notable for her intense love of God, described no longer fearing death because she had tasted the sweetness of God's presence, which she believed would continue after death. Similarly, many who have had near-death mystical experiences, a related category, return with less fear and a greater zest for life, feeling the universe is ultimately benevolent. This fearlessness often frees mystics to live more fully and selflessly. If you're not so afraid of what can happen to me, you can dedicate yourself to others or to truth without hesitation. That might be one reason so many spiritual heroes had mystic leanings. They were liberated from fear of loss or death. Compassionate action. As discussed, the growth of empathy and compassion is a hallmark. After union with the divine, who is often understood to be love itself, mystics feel called to express that love outwardly. In practice, this has led mystics to engage in acts of mercy, social justice, teaching, or simply everyday kindness. Saint Teresa of Avila, who had visions and ecstatic prayer experiences, went on to found numerous charitable convents and was noted for her practical leadership in her community. The Sufi Saint Rabia, after her enlightenment, devoted herself to serving the poor of Basra and even caring for animals. In Buddhism, after the Buddha's enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, His first impulse was to teach others the path to relieve suffering. In modern times, someone like the Dalai Lama, steeped in Buddhist mysticism, tirelessly advocates for compassion and peace globally. The pattern is that mystical insight collapses the distance between self and others, so caring for others becomes as natural as caring for oneself. Actually more natural, since the ego's selfishness has been reduced. There's a beautiful term in Buddhism, bodhicitta, the awakening heart-mind, which is essentially the altruistic desire to help all beings. Mystical experiences often ignite bodhicitta or its equivalent in other faiths, like caritas in Christianity, metta in Theravada Buddhism, or chisid in Kabbalah. Simplicity and presence. Many mystics adopt simpler lifestyles after their illumination. This isn't a rule, but commonly they lose interest in excessive materialism or status games. Having experienced an inner riches, external riches may seem trivial. Meister Eckhart boldly said, "If you seek God and want Him, you must renounce all things, including the seeking and wanting," implying a complete focus on God over worldly attachments. While not all mystics become monks or hermits, even those living in the world often exhibit a kind of lightness with possessions and titles. They also tend to become very present moment oriented. Since mystical consciousness is all about the eternal now, the timeless present where one met the divine, mystics practice bringing that presence into daily activities. Brother Lawrence's practice of the presence of God is a great example. He trained himself to continually converse with God internally while doing dishes, to the point that no moment was devoid of the sacred. Mindfulness in Buddhism similarly comes from the mystical understanding that now is the only reality. So mystics often live with a calm, mindful demeanor, attending to whatever is in front of them with devotion. This can have a healing effect on others around them. People often remark that being near a truly present, loving person, like Mother Teresa or Thich Nhat Hanh, changes their own state. Integration of heaven and earth. After a peak mystical event, there is usually a phase of integrating that experience into normal life. Mystics sometimes struggle at first. One might feel disoriented or yearn to go back into the trance of union. This is where guidance from spiritual directors or gurus is crucial historically. But the goal is integration, to bring the insight of heaven down to earth. Teresa of Avila talked about how after the highest mansion of union, the soul must come down to earth and carry out God's work with even greater efficacy. In Zen, there's a saying, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Outwardly, the actions are the same, but inwardly, the awareness is different. The integrated mystic is sometimes described as having one foot in each world, simultaneously aware of the divine unity and the particulars of daily existence. Ignatius of Loyola, a Christian mystic/organizer, coined the term contemplatives in action for those who maintain inner contemplation while actively serving in the world. When integration is successful, mystics become very effective agents of love and wisdom, precisely because they are not attached to ego or outcome. They often exhibit a kind of grace under pressure and an uncanny insight into situations, as if tapping a higher guidance. This makes them beloved teachers and leaders in their communities. In essence, mystical experiences tend to produce kinder, calmer, and more courageous human beings. Their relationships improve because they see others more deeply and treat them more gently. Many mystics become known for their magnetic compassion. People feel safe and heard around them. Even animals sometimes are drawn to mystics in stories. Saint Francis taming the wolf, or a legend of a tiger befriending a Buddhist saint, symbolizing the harmony such people emanate. It's not magic. It's the result of a heart that truly perceives the unity of life. Modern psychology has begun to study this, noting that people who report mystical experiences show lasting increases in empathy, life satisfaction, and reduction in depression/anxiety. Pioneering psychologist William James observed over a century ago that mystical states often give a person an abiding conviction of meaning and optimism, which carries them through life's challenges. Finally, mystics often face one more transformation: integration with society. In history, some mystics were misunderstood or even persecuted by the religious establishment. For example, Joan of Arc, or Sufi martyr Halaj, who exclaimed, "I am the truth," in ecstasy and was executed. Part of their journey is learning to express their insights in ways that benefit others without ego or imbalance. The most successful mystics founded enduring movements or writings that uplift others. Think of Rumi's poetry, or the Yoga Sutras, or the works of Julian of Norwich. Their legacy is that their personal union sparks a greater unity among people. They become bridges between humans and the divine. In our day, figures like Rumi have become global ambassadors of mystical love. His line, "Love is the bridge between you and everything," is quoted worldwide. Indeed, the world dearly needs the mystic's message that deep down, we are all connected. As the Sufi mystic Hazrat Inayat Khan said, the essence of spirituality and mysticism is to realize the unity of all life. When people realize that, empathy and peace follow. Mysticism in the modern world: meditation, prayer, and psychedelic awakenings. Mysticism isn't just ancient history, it's very much alive today. In fact, we are witnessing something of a mystical revival in modern times, though often outside the bounds of organized religion. People from all walks of life are exploring practices to gain deeper spiritual experience, from meditation retreats to prayer circles, from yoga studios to even therapeutic psychedelic sessions. Let's look at some of the ways modern seekers pursue the mystical path. Meditation and mindfulness. Meditation has gone mainstream, with millions practicing mindfulness or Eastern meditation techniques for stress relief, and often, they stumble into mystical territory. Sitting in silence, observing one's breath, or repeating a mantra can eventually lead to moments of ego-transcendence and unity, even if that wasn't the initial goal. A corporate employee might start mindfulness for relaxation and find themselves experiencing a blissful oneness with their surroundings one day. Traditional mystical meditation is also thriving. Zen monasteries in the West, Vipassana, insight meditation, retreats, and yoga meditation classes draw many who seek a taste of enlightenment. The rise of meditation apps and secular mindfulness courses has quietly introduced mystical concepts, like being fully present, non-judgmental awareness, into daily life. While not everyone will have a full-blown mystical experience, the tools are more accessible than ever. Modern science, intriguingly, has validated some aspects. Brain scans of meditators show quieting of the self-referential regions during deep meditation, correlating with reports of losing the sense of self, essentially the neural signature of a mild mystical state. As people get more curious, many delve deeper into Buddhist or Hindu philosophy to contextualize what they experience in meditation, thereby connecting with age-old mystic traditions. Contemplative prayer. Within Christianity and other faiths, there's been a renewal of interest in contemplative prayer, a form of prayer that is less about talking to God and more about silently resting in God's presence. Practices like centering prayer, popularized by Trappist monk Thomas Keating, and Christian meditation groups echo the methods of the medieval mystics, like the cloud of unknowings approach of using a sacred word to move beyond thoughts. Contemplative prayer groups now meet in many churches, bridging ordinary folks with the mystical heritage of Christianity. Similarly, Sufi orders are active in teaching practices like dhikr, rhythmic repetition of divine names, which can induce ecstatic unity states, even to newcomers. These practices provide a safe, guided environment for seekers to taste mystical communion. Many report that after months of such prayer, they feel a new intimacy with God, sometimes accompanied by gentle mystical experiences, a sense of inner light, a feeling of unity with others in the group, etc. Even outside formal groups, a lot of people adopt personal contemplative practices, perhaps reading Meister Eckhart or Julian of Norwich, and then sitting in silence. The interspiritual movement, spearheaded by teachers like Father Richard Rohr or the late Brother Wayne Teasdale, encourages people to draw on contemplative practices of multiple faiths. The result is a quiet but significant resurgence of mystical spirituality within religious communities that had long been focused only on external worship. Breathwork and embodied practices. Ancient mystics knew the power of the breath. Indian pranayama, Taoist breathing exercises, etc., were all used to shift consciousness. Today, modern breathwork sessions have become popular. Techniques like holotropic breathwork, developed by Stanislav Grof, a transpersonal psychologist, involve accelerated breathing with music, often leading to non-ordinary states of consciousness, including mystical-type experiences of unity or encountering a divine light. People come out of these sessions sometimes in tears of joy, saying they felt at one with the universe or met the divine within. Similarly, certain forms of dance or movement have mystical aims. 5 rhythms dance or ecstatic dance gatherings let people move freely, sometimes achieving a trance where the dancer and the dance become one, much like the whirling dervishes. Even some yoga classes go beyond physical postures and incorporate chanting Om or meditation at the end, giving participants a taste of the spiritual union yoga was originally designed for. In these ways, bodily practices are used in modern contexts to facilitate mystical-like states. Sound baths, where participants lie down as gongs and bowls are played, can also induce deep meditative unity experiences. It might seem new, but it's essentially age-old shamanic wisdom repackaged. Change the breath, use rhythm and sound, and you can shift consciousness toward the spiritual. Psychedelics, plant medicines, a headline-grabbing development in recent years, is the psychedelic renaissance. Substances like psilocybin, magic mushrooms, LSD, ayahuasca, and DMT, once relegated to counterculture, are now being studied by scientists for their ability to induce mystical experiences and help with mental health issues. Remarkably, research at Johns Hopkins and other universities found that a high dose of psilocybin in a controlled setting can trigger a classic mystical experience in about 60 to 70% of participants, according to psychological scales, like feeling unity, sacredness, ineffability, etc. Many volunteers rated it among the top 5 most meaningful experiences of their lives, comparable to the birth of a child. Moreover, those who had these mystical experiences showed lasting positive changes. They were less depressed, more open-hearted, and maintained lifestyle improvements months later. This has led some to call psychedelics entheogens, literally, generating the divine within. Indigenous cultures have long used plant medicines like peyote or ayahuasca in shamanic rituals to commune with the spirit world, which often includes mystical union elements. Shamans might report merging with the Great Spirit or seeing the interconnected web of life. Now, many Western seekers are partaking in ayahuasca ceremonies or psilocybin retreats, legally in some countries, underground elsewhere, explicitly seeking spiritual insight. While caution is warranted, set and setting are crucial and integration afterwards is needed, it's undeniable that psychedelics have put mystical experience on the map for a new generation. Some even link this to religion's origins, theorizing that such substances may have sparked visionary experiences that became codified. Regardless, today we see a unique convergence of science and mysticism, neuroscientists scanning brains during psychedelic states to understand how the sense of self dissolves, etc. It challenges the materialist view and validates what mystics have said, that the brain can shift into states where it perceives a unitive, sacred reality beyond our normal filters. Transpersonal psychology and integral spirituality. Starting in the 1970s, Psychologists like Abraham Maslow and Stanislav Grof began exploring transpersonal psychology, which deals with spiritual or transcendent aspects of the mind. Maslow famously talked about peak experiences, moments of intense unity and insight that even non-religious people have, like in nature or art, which he saw as essentially mystical. He noted that self-actualized people often have such peaks and are changed by them. This opened the door to normalizing mysticism as a human potential rather than a weird anomaly. Grof, through his LSD therapy research, encountered so many reports of mystical oneness and cosmic consciousness that he incorporated Eastern mystic concepts into his theories. Today, transpersonal therapists might help clients integrate spiritual experiences, and there are even questionnaires, like the Mystical Experience Questionnaire, MEQ, used in research to quantify the degree of mystical experience. All this to say, modern psychology is taking mysticism seriously, studying its effects on wellness and personality. Some findings: mystical experiences often lead to increased openness, empathy, and life meaning. They can dramatically reduce fear of death, and when properly integrated, they correlate with better mental health. This has contributed to what some call integral spirituality, an approach championed by thinkers like Ken Wilber that tries to include the truths of mysticism in a holistic understanding of human development. In integral theory, the mystical realization, non-dual awareness, is seen as a high stage of consciousness evolution, but one that can and does occur for people today, not just ancient saints. Interfaith and universal mysticism. With globalization, people have access to all the world's mystical literature at their fingertips. A modern seeker might simultaneously read Rumi, the Bhagavad Gita, the Tao Te Ching, and the Cloud of Unknowing. This cross-pollination has given rise to a kind of universal mysticism or perennial philosophy perspective, the idea that all mystic paths lead to the same summit. While each tradition has unique flavors, many feel a kinship when reading another's mystics. As a result, you see groups like the Golden Sufi Center, which welcomes people of any background to Sufi meditation, or Christian-Buddhist dialogue retreats where monks engross his swap methods. The Dalai Lama often says, mysticism is the common ground of all religions. In practice, more individuals identify as spiritual but not religious and curate their own practices, a bit of yoga, a bit of chanting, maybe mindful nature walks, aiming for that mystical connection without strict affiliation. This has its pitfalls, shallowness, cultural appropriation issues, but on the whole, it reflects a deep human hunger for direct spiritual experience. People are less satisfied with dogmas and more interested in what they can feel and verify inwardly. Thus, even in a seemingly secular age, meditation centers are full, mystic poetry books sell well, and festivals like spirit festivals or Burning Man incorporate ritual and collective transcendence experiences for attendees. It's clear that the mystical impulse is alive and adapting. Whether through ancient means like meditation and prayer or novel ones like guided psychedelic therapy, people are finding ways to peel back the layers of ordinary consciousness and touch something profound. Technology even hints at future possibilities. Some experiment with sensory deprivation tanks, brainwave entrainment audio, or even magnetic brain stimulation to induce altered states. Time will tell how those pan out, but the enduring truth is that mysticism addresses an intrinsic human longing. The longing to know, who am I? What is the ultimate reality? How can I feel connected and whole? No matter how modern we become, those questions remain, and mysticism offers experiential answers. Conclusion: the mystic heart in everyday life. Mysticism, far from being a relic of the past, is a timeless human journey, the journey of remembering our unity with the ultimate. We've seen how, across cultures and eras, mystics have been the pioneers of inner space, bravely venturing beyond the ego to bring back insights of love, oneness, and compassion. They are like climbers who've reached the mountaintop and returned with glowing faces, proclaiming that all is one and God is love. Their testimonies, remarkably concordant, invite us to taste and see for ourselves that deeper reality. In our fast-paced world, the mystic's message is perhaps more relevant than ever. Amid division and anxiety, mysticism reminds us that beneath our surface differences, we are deeply interconnected, fundamentally one, as the Taoists say. The compassion that flows from this realization is exactly what our world needs. One doesn't have to be a cloistered monk or a whirling dervish to live with a mystic heart. The principles of mysticism, love, unity, surrender, presence, compassion, can infuse anyone's life. You might experience many mystical moments watching a sunset, or in heartfelt prayer, or losing yourself in a beautiful piece of music. By cultivating stillness, gratitude, and empathy, we create conditions for these glimpses to occur. Over time, those glimpses can coalesce into a quieter but stable shift, seeing the sacred in the everyday. The mystics also give comfort that the divine is not a distant concept, but an intimate reality, nearer to me than my jugular vein, as the Quran says. As Teresa of Avila affirmed, the interior castle, the soul, has the divine light at its center. We carry that hidden treasure within, and mystical practices help unveil it. In a sense, mysticism makes spirituality experiential. It's one thing to read that God is love. It's another to feel an indescribable love wash over you in prayer. That feeling can anchor a person's faith far more than doctrine. Thus, mysticism can revitalize religion from within, moving it from mere belief to lived encounter. Finally, let's recall that mysticism is not about escaping this world, but transforming our perception of it. After union, the mystic comes back and proclaims, like Jacob in the Bible, truly, God was in this place, and I knew it not. The world itself becomes the monastery, the heart every bit as holy as any temple. As an old Zen saying goes, the miraculous is not to walk on water or fire. The real miracle is to walk on this earth. The mystic sees the miracle in the mundane because they see the one shining through all. In that spirit, each of us can practice a bit of mysticism in daily life, perhaps pausing in gratitude, seeing a stranger as a soul, letting go of a grudge in recognition of a shared divinity, or finding moments of silence amid activity to touch base with our deeper self. Mysticism, in the end, is the art of union with the divine, with nature, with one's own highest self, and with each other. It doesn't remove us from life. It plunges us into life more fully, with eyes open to the wholeness. As the 20th century mystic Teilhard de Chardin said, we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. The mystic knows this through and through. And if we take anything from them, let it be the inspiration that such knowing is possible, that within the heart of each person lies an infinite depth waiting to be discovered. The mystics serve as both map and beacon, pointing the way toward that radiant core where, as Julian of Norwich lovingly saw, all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. In our own humble ways, we too can embark on this journey, through meditation or prayer, through love and service, step by step moving toward the unity that mystics assure us is our true home. Mysticism invites us to live from that home, here and now, and thereby transform our world from the inside out. We truly hope you found this episode helpful and enjoyed listening. Share this with your friends and family so they can begin their transformation too. And if you haven't yet subscribed to our channel, give this video a thumbs up and we'll be in contact. If you're really interested in esotericism, then check out our courses and ebook. Thank you for watching. We wish you ocean of abundance, great health, huge wealth, and true love.